We are starting our first full session, which is History of the Land based on River in a Dry Land, and Indigenous perspective on the importance of water. We have the privilege of having Lyndon Linklater speak with us. In just a moment, I'm going to provide a little bit of a bio first. Lyndon J. Linklater is a traditional knowledge keeper and storyteller. I'm sure many of us have heard him or seen him before. He has an educational background in Indian social work, Indian studies, and some law. He is a citizen of the Thunderchild First Nation, Plains Cree, in Treaty 6, and has roots in Couchiching First Nation, Fort Frances, Ontario, in Treaty 3. Presently, Lyndon shares work with the Remy Modern Art Museum in Saskatoon as their Indigenous Relations Advisor, providing advice to their board and staff and delivering cultural programming. He has also served with the Office of the Treaty Commissioner's Speakers Bureau since 2000. And we're 2022 already. I was reading this yesterday. I was like, holy, that's 22 years. Over the years, he has spoken to tens of thousands of people, delivering awareness and enlightenment on Treaty and First Nations worldviews. Lyndon.
Lyndon, thanks for being here. I would just like to offer you some tobacco.
Oh, wonderful.
For the teachings that you're going to be sharing with us, and also a thank you.
Oh, thank you, Randy.
Thanks so much for being here.
Okay, thank you.
Make sure you use the mic.
Okay.
And if you want to roam, you can just take it out.
Well, good morning. Thank you for asking me to be here this morning. How much time I got? You got to tell me because I can talk long here.
40 minutes.
Okay, good to know. Time me. I got a clock up here too. Well, good morning, everybody. Some of you, I know, I've seen Kelly Humphrey and Carrie Catherine and Honey Constant. Oh my! Some of you, and some of you I know too. So forgive me if I don't say your name. But I can't help it. I'm a storyteller, and I'm going to tell you a few different stories. But don't worry, there's a method to my madness. Okay, so I want to start off by saying, sharing with you. Both my parents went to those residential schools. As I found out probably about 3 years ago, I didn't know this, both my grandparents on both sides, as well as my great-grandparents went as well. So that's like 3 generations of my my bloodline went to those residential schools. I come from a family of 7 siblings. Once upon a time, there were 7 of us, and we grew up in the city. And to some extent, those residential schools were successful in that we were not taught our language. We were always taught to be proud of our heritage, about our traditions as First Nations peoples. But it was as if we were like prevented from exploring that knowledge any deeper, and that's just how it was growing up. And to make a real long story short, ultimately, what started happening is we went back to our traditional ways. So in my life now, I'm 58, so I've been learning close to 40 years. I've been reacquiring my traditional knowledge, and it's very fascinating. And what I want to start off by sharing with you, in my attempt to learn, I was introduced to these people. In English, they're called elders. In our culture, the word elder doesn't exist. It's not our word. In our language, we would say kihteyak. That's to describe the old people. As many of you may know, we never had a written language. So books don't mean nothing to us, traditionally speaking. How we learn is by oral tradition. So this is the reason why we value our old people, because they're full of life experience, they're full of knowledge. Incidentally, I just came from a pipe ceremony this morning at SaskTel Center. There's a powwow going on, and I'm helping out there. And we had a pipe ceremony yesterday morning, and we had a pipe ceremony this morning. There'll be 2 more tomorrow to finish. When I listen to the elders pray in the language, they pray for this concept. It's called Wapstagwani. That's what it's called. And when you translate that to English, they're praying for white hair. Isn't that something? In our culture, we got this thing called Clairol. And this thing called Grecian formula. Yeah, and anyways, that's what they pray for. Because in our culture, like we equate white hair with wisdom. Because our old people, they have a lot of wisdom. So anyways, in my attempt to, reacquire my traditions, I met these wonderful, beautiful people, these Gihdeyak, and they are traditional ceremonial people. They took me in, they adopted me, I became their son. He became my dad, she became my mom. Just like that, they became my parents, and I became their son, and as well as all their children and their family. And I wanted to learn about these ceremonies in our culture. And so what I was taught from my teacher, if I wanted to learn to be a helper, I had to undergo this training. And as part of the training, I was taught that I would have to complete a fast, so going without food and water. And in our culture, it's like how I was taught, it's 4 days, no food, no water, and you do that 4 consecutive years in a row. And when you finish your 4th year, it's like you kind of get your papers, right? So like you become like an apprentice. So that's how I started my journey. If you think about that to yourselves, what's the longest you've been without water? So imagine going 4 days, like no food and no water. Food, it ain't so bad. You get hungry, but it's the water that's very challenging. But at the same time, we need to understand that this ceremony, this fasting ceremony that I undertook in order to become, I guess, I'm knowledge keeper now. It's full of prayer, and you do a lot of praying, and you communicate with Creator, as well as all of the other spirits in the universe, and I just did what I was told. I didn't really quite get it or understand, like, why do we got to do this, But anyways, like, as I started to learn, and like, it's been years and years, I've fasted over the years more too, but I remember that was my first 4 years, and to go without food and water. And I can't tell you enough how precious that water is. Like you see, I see it on your tables there. And when you're fasting, you think about all the times you used to play with water, squirting it and pouring it out, and you just wish you could have just a little drop, and your lips start to dry and crack, like, and you got no saliva, and it's like thick white mucus, and like you start to like dehydrate. And anyways, that's when I started to really realize the sacredness of water, how important water is. And in my journey as well, as I got into being like Oskapios, that's what I'm called, a helper. I remember helping out in ceremony, and I remember my teacher saying to me, I was about 10 years into it, and my teacher said to me, "You know what, Lyndon? You got to learn your language, because our ancestors, they don't talk English, so you're going to have to learn the language." So I gave me more drive to, learn the language. So some of you may have heard this already, but you just bear with me, play along. I want to teach you some of the language, okay? So in Saskatchewan here, we have the Cree, Treaty 6 territory. The vast majority of the signatories were Cree people. We had some Nakota and some Saulteaux as well, but for the vast majority, they're all Cree. And within our province here, we have 3 different dialects of Cree: the Plains Cree, the Woodland Cree, and the Swampy Cree. And there are these linguists in university. They study language, and they've figured this out, and so they've assigned these letters to these different dialects. So the Plains Cree have the Y dialect, the Woodland Cree have the TH dialect, and the Swampy Cree have the N dialect. So to help you understand that, I want you to repeat after me. Say Nia. Yeah. Now, if you spell that N-I-Y-A, Nia. So what does Nia mean? Very good. Me. Yeah. So repeat after me and do as I do. Point to someone and say Kia. Yeah. Point to someone else. Say Kia. So what does Kia mean? Very good. You. So Nia, Kia. If you spell Kia, K-I-Y-A. See, there's a letter Y in there. And for third person, if I'm pointing to him, I'd say weya. If I'm pointing to her, I'll say weya. It's the same word. So it's like genderless. So weya means him, weya means her. Whose cell phone is this? They'll say weya. We don't know if it's a male or female. We've got to wait till we kind of look at them. And even then, sometimes we have trouble, but we'll figure it out. And if you spell weya, W-I-Y-A. So that's why they call it the Y dialect. So the Woodland Cree, they speak the TH dialect. So how they say me, the Y gets changed to a TH. They'll say nitha. To say nitha, kitha, witha. Do you get it? Swampy Cree speak the N dialect. So how do the Swampy Cree say me? Nina. Very good. And Nina, Kina, Wina. You see? Now, as Cree speakers, we can understand each other. And there's Harry Lafon, too. I didn't know you were sitting there. It's another guy I know. Anyways, as Cree speakers, Plains, Woodland, and Swampy, like, we can understand each other. It's just those words that have, like, in our language, a letter Y in it. It'll get changed to an N or a TH. So you understand that a little bit? So here's the joke, okay? We found this stray cat at the animal shelter. We fed the cat, gave the cat milk, started petting the cat. We know that cat was a Woodland Cree cat because when you pet it, it was going mithow, mithow. So what I'm going to teach you some Plains Cree because that's what we are. We come from Thunderchild on my mom's side. So in our what we call ourselves, we would call ourselves Nehio, like that's singular or. So anyways, like Nehio, and there's a letter Y in there. So the Swampy Cree, they'll call themselves Netheho. I was trouble saying it. And Nehinaho, like in Swampy Cree, because it gets changed, right? But that's where we're Nehio, that's singular. So I will teach you a little bit. Interestingly, so I'm learning all this language, right? And don't worry, I'm getting to where we're talking about here. But I want to teach you how we pluralize our subject matters. So in English, the general rule, you put a letter S at the end of the root word to make it plural, more than one. In English, proper English, I see one car, I see 10 cars. Got to put that S at the end of the root word to make it plural. Okay, so in our language, the general rule, it depends what you're talking about, whether it's alive or not alive. If what you're talking about is alive or animate, it's going to end in an AK, ak. So ak is like a letter S in our language to make it plural. If what you're talking about is not alive, it's just going to end in a letter A and make a ah sound at the end of the root word. So the ah is like a letter S in English to make it plural. So it depends what you're talking about. So remember I told you Nehio is singular, so how would you make it plural? Nehioak. Very good. Oh, you got it. So that door over there's a man standing by the door there. So how we say door, we say isquatem. Can you say that? Very good. So how would you say doors, plural? Isquatema. Very good. You sound like a bunch of English people talking Cree, but you're right. Us will say squatama, kind of just real squatama. We wouldn't say squatamak, right? Because the door's not alive. So, someone, please, I hope I get it right. Ask me, how do you say this? And there's, hey, I know that guy too over there. How do you, ask me how you say something in Cree that's alive, so, like anything that's kind of alive. A tree and a bear. Okay, very good. Tree. So tree, how we say tree, we'll say mitos. How do you say trees? Mitosak. Very good. Very good. Bear. There's different ways to say bear. Waganoose. Waganoose. Wagayus. Wagayus is bear, singular. How would you say bears, plural? Yeah, wagayusak. Yeah, very good. Wonderful. Now, there's always exceptions, right? There's always exceptions. Like in English, I see one moose, I see 10 moose. You don't say mooses, right? I see, I don't know, there's other examples in English, but so when we talk about water, like I don't know if there's a plural for water. I don't think there is. Like nipi is water. Like water is, there's no nipia or nipiak. It doesn't sound like in our language. So finally, another example, we talk about, I'm going down the road there, I pick up a little pebble or a stone. How we say stone or rock is asini. Can you say that? Asini. So how do you say rocks, plural? I hear a couple like asinia. We would say asiniyak in our culture. Because in our culture, rocks are alive. You see? So, and this is in our traditional culture, what we believe is that everything Creator created has a spirit. That means it's alive. So if you think of all the things Great Spirit created, air, rocks, water. See, in our culture, those are alive. The land is alive. See, so this is the importance of what culture and language. And so in my journey of learning, I've come to the, I'm getting up there, like, take my time though, but I'm starting to catch on and learn more and more and more, and I'm starting to understand, even more. If you can think of water, like from an indigenous perspective, like water is alive. And in our culture too, we associate, we call them spirits. Like there's a tree spirit, there's a rock spirit, there's an air spirit. Everything that Creator made has a spirit. So if you can think of all those things, to us, like they're alive. And every culture is the same on planet Earth in terms of how they will treat something if it's alive or if it's not alive. When something is alive, we will tend to treat it with more respect. Yeah. Doesn't matter what culture you come from. This is how we're taught, like as people, when something is alive, we're going to tend to treat it with more respect. So if you can think of that, and so for this reason, like we associate relationship with these spirits. So we will call the land, we call her our mother. That's our Mother Earth. We'll call the grandfather sun, the grandfather winds, the grandmother moon. See? And those relationships are so deeply, deeply valued, like in our traditional way of thinking. When we think about water, like water is very sacred. I've heard, I guess, analogies that they equate the water to the Mother Earth's blood, and the rivers are the veins, and they carry this, nourishing life component to all of creation. We are all related in the sense that we share the sun, we share the land, we share the air, we share water. So as human beings, as people on planet Earth, like that's how we're related. But it's not just us. It's also the animals. It's also the birds. It's also the insects. If I was to ask you this question, I don't know how many of you would say yes, but would you be willing to sell me your mother? Yeah or no? In one word, how would you describe a person who'd even ask that question? In one word. Disrespectful. Any other words? Crazy. Yeah. Our culture is very different than the colonizing culture. In the colonizing culture, you want to own land. The more land you own, the better off you're going to be. How many of you here got or had a mortgage? I got one too. Like this is the way we live, okay? This is how we live, and like it's better to have well, that's what they say anyways. It's better to own your house than to be renting it, right? Because you build equity, right? And over time you can sell it, right? Like so. Anyways, in that culture, you want to buy land. So when we were making treaty with the crown, that's what our leaders were asked. They asked us and said to us, "We want to buy your land." And we're like, "That's our mother. That's a Mother Earth. We cannot sell you our mother. We just can't." Like, however, what we'd be willing to do is we'd be willing to share the land. That's what we can do. We'll share the land. But if you look at the written treaty, in nowhere at all does it mention anything about sharing any land. Doesn't make any mention whatsoever. It just says the Indians hereby cede, surrender, and yield up to the Dominion of Canada, and all the Queen and the Crown and all the successors, all their rights and titles and privileges to the lands whatsoever. And it goes on, right? Like, anyways, from a cultural perspective, if you could understand that and appreciate that, and I believe you are, like we all have to, because our world is changing. You know, global warming is real. There's some people there, they still don't believe it, right? I've even met scientists who don't believe it. I met this guy who was a scientist. I couldn't believe it. But it just seems like common sense when you look at everything that we put into the air, into the land, into the water. Like it's going to come back to us, right? Like that's what's happening. I just seen recently, you know, on the little ticker tape on the CTV Newsnet that goes by on the bottom, they found some cancer-causing agent in this shampoo. So they're pulling the shampoo off the market now, you know, and it kind of, I don't know how you guys were, but you know, when the vaccines were first coming out, you know, for COVID, there's like resistance, and there were some people, I'm not putting anything in my body that I don't know of, and I'm thinking, what kind of shampoo you use? But you know, there's a lot of things we just don't know about, but it has impacts on us, and you know, and that's the situation there. Anyways, it might seem strange to you, but this is our culture as Indigenous peoples, and like to think about, like personally, what really fired me up to want to learn my traditions and my culture and my ceremonies is when I learned about the creation of those residential schools by these men. You know, these men sat around a table and they decided to build them. What good is teaching them how to read and write? They'll just be educated savages. What we need to do is take the child and kill the Indian in the child. Like that's their, you know, what's recorded in history is what they said, and we'll take them away and put them in these schools. And that's how the whole residential school idea came about. And so when I learned all this, I got fired up. And I said, I'm not going to let those knuckleheads get away with it. Like, I'm going to learn my language. I'm going to learn my traditions and my culture. As part of reconciliation, I often get asked this question, what can I do as a Canadian to promote truth and reconciliation. And I got seems like a simple answer, but what I tell them is, whatever those residential schools are about, do the complete opposite. That's how you can help us reacquire our languages. When I learned, as I'm learning the language, like more and more, like I can converse. I understand when they're talking the language now. And I was listening to them talk this morning at the pipe ceremony at Sast Health Center there, and they're all talking all in Cree. And I found it so fascinating. I was actually at a Cree conference with Harry, I don't know, a few months back there. And there was this one, this old man was talking all in Cree, right? Not a word of English. And I was listening, and what he was saying was there's different ways, 2 different ways he was talking about how you ask someone, like, what is your name? So when I took Cree 100 in university, like, you learn, and they'll say, Tansi Sigasuyan. Like, that's how you say that. Like, what is your name? So the teacher will see you, Tansi Sigasuyan, and you'll say your name, right? And Lyndon Sigasun, like, that's the response, right? And so you go to the next person, Tansi Sigasuyan. Like, anyways, this elder was telling the story about, that word. Within that word, somewhere in the root of that word, there's a connotation of something to do with water or splashing. So what he was explaining in Cree was, when someone asks you that, "Tansi Sigashin," it's almost like they're saying, what is your splashing name? Do you know why they would ask you that question? Anybody? So how he explained it was, because many of us were baptized. And they pour water on the baby, when they get baptized. So when they say that in Cree, Tansi Sigashin, like, it's like it's almost like, what is your splashing name? So what's your Christian name is another way. So I would say, like, Lyndon Joseph Linklater and Sigashin, like that's what I would say. And the other way he says how you say what is your name, or how you can understand it to be what is your name. They'll say Tansi Kitsigashin. That's a little bit different way. It's a little bit different. Tansi Kitsigashin is the second way. The first way, Tansi Sigashian. Say it a little bit different. Kitsi means your belly button. Okay, so when they say Tansi Kitsigashin, what they're asking in there is like, who are your relations? Because we all come from our mom's womb, and there's an umbilical cord, and we're connected through that umbilical cord, and all of us had umbilical cords, right? So where did we get those from? Eventually, it's going to go up like to the past, the ancestors. So that's what this old man said, all in Cree. So when they say that, that's like that's like what they're saying is like they want to know who's your mom and dad, who's your grandparents, like where do you come from, like your origins of your bloodline. So there's 2 different ways how that was said, and he said this all in Cree, like not a word of English. And I was telling my mom, was that ever cool, that guy was saying in there, like, talk to my, mostly in English. She always tries to get me to talk Cree, but sometimes I will. But anyways, I was saying that, and like, she's like, holy, he understood. She was like proud of me, because it was all in Cree. But see how powerful language is. And that's what I mean, like, it was as if I figured out that John A. MacDonald didn't want me to know that rocks were alive. He didn't want people to know that water is alive, and it's like it's like our somebody very, very like the matriarch or the patriarch of the family. Like, we just surround ourselves. We all have families here, right? And we all know who that. As time goes on, we got that matriarch or the patriarch, whoever it is, and like we surround ourselves with them, like that's our world, so to speak, If we can think like that towards water, towards air, towards the land, what a different place it would be, hey? So anyways, I noticed it's 10 o'clock, that's 30 minutes. I started at 9:30. I was keeping track here. So, anyways, yeah, that's my message I want to share with you, to think about that, like that water. There's more to water than just drinking it. Like, even though that sounds very like simple to say, but it's true. And it's not just us who need it. Like the all living beings need that. And just to finish off too, like, it's so good, like, because of reconciliation, you have asked Indigenous people to be involved in your conference. And I highly doubt you would ever get this perspective had you not asked us to come and share with you, eh? Like, that's so cool. Like, way to go. What we have to do, as a nation, is we have to get out of that, no disrespect, but the colonial way of thinking. Because it makes sense. There's always a better way to do things. No matter what it is, there's always a better way. And if we can borrow and share other concepts from other cultures, other peoples, to make it better for everybody, well, sign me up. So, if elected, I promise that. So, that's my stale joke. I always say a cheap joke. But I'm going to stop there, unless you have questions. If you like, yeah.
First of all, before we get into questions, though, I do have to say, like, it's pretty cool, to your point, that we asked you to come, but it's even cooler that you came. So thank you. Yeah. I feel very privileged to be able to participate in this, for sure. So yes, we do have some time. So are there any questions from the crew here today that you would have for Lyndon, even if it's, hey, can we learn some more Cree? Because I'm going to go, I took some notes. I'm going to practice. But any questions? So she and maybe come up so then you can speak here, but wants to learn some more Cree and suggestions.
Oh, yeah, well, the university has Cree 100, Cree 101. You can go to the university. There are other places in the city, like I know of the Friendship Center offers like Cree, and it's free. You just call the Friendship Center, when are the Cree classes, and you'll learn the day or whatever and the time. So just like anything, takes a little bit of practice, but there's so much beauty and power when you hear it in another language. And because if you can only speak one language, this is how you see the world. Is anyone here speak another language other than English? Yeah, cool. What other languages you speak? Oh my, you sprechen Sie Deutsch. Sehr gut. Yeah, it's that's what language does, is it takes these off, and you get to see things differently and understand things differently. Yeah, so, but the indigenous languages, they share a lot of commonalities in the sense that like rocks are alive, air is alive. Like it's within our languages that make it so unique. I heard a story about the spider's web. How we as people, we don't, because it's in our culture. Our culture prevents us from understanding, I guess. But when we do something, it doesn't just affect us, and it's like that spider's web. Like everything's connected. All living things are connected, and we have to try to understand that. So, like at a ceremony, many times we'll have a food offering, And what we'll do is we'll say a prayer with that food, and then we'll take that food, we'll either put it in a fire or we'll put it out on the land, like to feed the ancestors, to feed the spirits. And we talk to them, we talk to the water. Like before they drink it, they say, "Thank you, water." Like that's what they say, right? It seems so like crazy, but that's how they do things, you know? And that's all like because of culture and language. Anyways, I better stop yapping here. Yeah. So I've heard many stories. One story I liked when I heard it was when Great Spirit first made this part of the world, one of the very first plants ever made, tobacco. Ask a scientist. I don't know if a scientist can do DNA testing on the plants to actually see what could have possibly have been one of the first plants. I don't know if that's scientifically possible, but I know we have what we've referred to as our sacred plants that we use in ceremony, and there's like 4 of them. And tobacco is one: cedar, sage, and sweetgrass. And in our ceremonies, we often use these plants in our ceremonies to smudge with. Inside that tobacco, what it does is it acts as a universal translator. So we have that tobacco. So this tobacco was presented to me, which is another tradition. Whenever you ask to share knowledge or teachings, it's a tradition. Just like, you know, what do they call that? Mistletoe at Christmas time. It's like a tradition, right? Yeah. So anyways, you offer tobacco. So when tobacco's involved, there's 3 parties: the one that offers, the one that accepts, and who's the third party? Creator. So when tobacco's involved, like Creator's involved, so God is with us. And so what that allows the person is to share their teachings. Sometimes you might talk to an elder and say, "Hey, can you tell me the history of the buffalo or the teepee?" And they'll just kind of look at you. And they'll tell you this much. But because you didn't give tobacco, right? But if you give tobacco, then they'll tell you like this much now, right? Like, but anyways, that's the significance of tobacco. You know, we know that smoking cigarettes isn't good for you because the tobacco nowadays has like, you know, what they sell, you know. But we still use our natural tobaccos, like at the pipe ceremony this morning. We still use, and so it's very thousands and thousands of year old tradition. Tobacco is very, very important to us. Yeah. Cool.
One more, probably.
Oh.
Sure. Oh, sorry.
Well, I'm gonna go have a smoke now. I'm just teasing. Today is, as mentioned, I work at Ramey Modern. I'm there half time. Today's our 5th anniversary, so I gotta go over there. Yeah, go help out over there, and the powwow's going on, and anyways, I gotta get going. But thank you for having me. Good to see all of you, Byron. Good to see you. Harry, always good to see you. I call him Uncle Harry. I adopted him. He doesn't know it, but it is good to see you all of you. I'm going to hit the road. Okay? Have a great day.
Well, I'm really glad we offered tobacco, so we got to hear all of that and not just this. So that was quite lovely. Awesome. So thank you. We are moving in. Today is a little bit of video and then in person, then video. So now we had video and then in person. So what's next? Video. You guys are quick. I wasn't sure if I could do the same educational piece that Lyndon did with the Cree, but you did very well. We are going to listen to a video from Trevor Herriot. I'll tell you a little bit about his bio here, and then, oh, you're here. Yeah, Heather will cue the video for us. Trevor Herriot is a naturalist, grassland conservationist, and the author of several award-winning books, including Grass Sky Song and the national bestseller River in a Dry Land. He has published essays and articles in several publications. He appears regularly on CBC Radio Saskatchewan's Birdline and has been featured in several documentaries, including Grasslands, A Hidden Wilderness. He and his wife, Karen, live in Regina and spend much of their time on a piece of aspen parkland prairie east of this city. Oh, if you'd like to stand quickly and stretch, or stand while you watch, we could do that. We can do two things at once, yeah. If you want to stretch a little bit, please do so, and Heather will cue.
Hello. We're going to go for a little walk outside, but first I want to talk a bit about home. Home can mean a lot of things. It can mean the building you live in, the land of your birth, or the entire bioregion where you happen to be living. But as people of settler descent or newcomers, home and belonging are ideas we're still exploring, kind of coming to terms with. One way to do that is to think about the watershed where you live and how you've come to be there and how you might want to live there. Outside on the land, even if you live in an urban area, there are all kinds of stories. There's the stories of what was here in the earth, in the ecology of the place before colonization and settlement, and there are the stories after settlement. And one way to sort of put some boundaries around those stories in your place is to consider the watershed. So you can step out your door and just follow the lines of gravity down to the nearest creek or stream or river or internal drainage basin. The watershed concept organizes place and our connection to place, and helps us look for those stories that tell us how our culture, how our civilization has used the land and what might be possible going forward. This little urban park is called Les Sherman Park. It's full of beautiful trees, and right now there are birds enjoying those trees here, and the fall migration is on, and we've got yellow-rumped warblers moving through. The first white-throated sparrows arrived a few days ago. But these trees weren't here 150 years ago. Not at all. In fact, along Wascana Creek, the highest vegetation would have been about ankle height. Well, maybe knee height in areas of more moist grass. And then there would have been some shrubs a little bit higher than that right by the creek. But other than that, it would have been a vast grassland, old growth prairie, more than 10,000 years old. It, in the 1930s, was still, and 40s I think, was still a lot of native grass, with some trees probably, and had been turned into a golf course that Regina people were using. It was called the Gyro Golf Course. And there were still some native grassland birds using the place, which are some of the most endangered birds on the planet, but they were surviving here in Regina right through the 30s and 40s. But it was converted later into this kind of park landscape with only a couple of species of grasses, and the rest are trees and shrubs. I don't want to underplay its value as urban habitat and an urban forest, but there's been a loss, and that loss is the native grassland. that was here on the Regina Plains. 150 years ago, it was all old-growth prairie. The soil had been built up over thousands of years in a relationship between the indigenous people who were managing the bison with hunting and fire, moving them around, and the bison and their hoof impacts and their grazing habits shaped the grassland. But that's gone now. On the Regina Plains eco-district, more than 99% of the land has been stripped of its native cover. Most of it is agricultural, except for the city and a few other and farmyards and small villages and so on the Regina Plains. There's a trio of wood ducks on the creek. It's a bird that probably wasn't here 150 years ago when we didn't have so many trees along Wascana Creek. They've been increasing recently. It's a lovely bird. It's native to North America. We're grateful to have it here to brighten our days. But it's a change that's worth knowing about. Like many of the other changes here on this plain. There are now 350,000 trees in Regina. Almost all of them have been planted. So the question comes, why was Regina chosen to be a city, to be the capital of the district that became the province of Saskatchewan? That's a good question, worth looking into as a person who lives in this place, in this watershed. A beaver heading downstream. The Regina Plains, which is all part of an old glacial lake bed, are drained by 5 creeks. Wascana is just one of those 5 creeks. And it's a good thing we still have those creeks, because the remaining native grassland in the region is almost entirely along the edges of the creeks. So there's these little winding lines that go across the Regina Plains that hold on to the ancient prairie plants and some of the ecology, although most of the birds and a lot of the insects are gone, and some of the native mammals, certainly, of course, the bison and the bison wolf. And there's not too many pronghorn antelope make it this way as far north anymore. But there are some birds, and the plants are still there as a part of the story, reminding us of what was here all over the Regina Plains at one time. But things began to change, especially when the decision to put the railroad, the Canadian Pacific Railroad, through this area happened. That was why Regina was chosen as a site for a capital. And it changed everything. It named the city after Queen Victoria, which of course is a good symbol of colonization, the crown itself. And everything changed after that. The plains were cleared of most indigenous people. The Métis, the Nahio, the Lakota peoples who had been living here and hunting the bison and managing the landscape were no longer there. And so our settler ancestors began to arrive on the CPR, on the trains. The city of Regina was built up. The farms all around here were established on homesteads with what was considered to be improvements to the land by cultivating it. in effect destroying the old growth prairie that had been there for thousands of years, maintaining the health and ecology of the place and its first peoples. We know that's the story of this place, but it's important to understand our place in it within this watershed, if this is the place you live. And all watersheds have these stories on the Great Plains. We need to investigate them and own our responsibility and place within them. And it's not hard to do. Part of living well in a watershed and facing its stories honestly is to understand how colonization continues today. How colonization and colonial extractive economies continue to alienate indigenous people from their ancestral lands with trespass laws, the sell-off of crown land, racism, and the destruction of the ecological integrity of our rivers, prairies, and forests. Those of us who have legal title to most of the land, sometimes vast acreages, too often we treat it as a commodity rather than as a community to which we belong. There's a muskrat swimming his way along the creek. They've been quiescent or absent through the drought years, but this year I saw them rebound on the creek and come back. Beautiful little creatures making their way in a much altered water system. The good news is that there still is a parcel of land along Wascana Creek in the city, on the Regina Plains, that shows us at least a facsimile of the way the Regina Plains once looked. It is a grassland. Most of it's non-native, but the natives are still here. It's an old, decrepit golf course that has been let to go back to grass, and some of the natives have persisted along the edges, especially at the creek. And it's on a parcel of land near the Regina Airport, sandwiched between airport industry buildings and a curling club, the dog park on the north, and the freeway on the east side. It's the old Craig golf course site, and there's an opportunity here to do something really good for the Regina Plains. This is the place I come to imagine what the creek must have looked like originally, without all the trees that we've planted, just a few smaller trees and shrubs all along its banks. And then grassland above on the floodplain. A native sage here, pasture sage. There's a goldenrod. There's little asters here close to the ground. And if I look down on the ground between the plants, you start to see the droppings of white-tailed jackrabbits mixed in with ground squirrel droppings. Because the Richardson's ground squirrel, or the gopher, the much maligned and persecuted prairie gopher, is here in good numbers still, trying to do its part to restore the grassland. And there are native grasses too. It's been a surprise getting to know this place. Although I've lived a long time in this watershed, I didn't realize how many native plants were persisting here on this old golf course site. There goes a jackrabbit. As settler people of good faith, I think it's possible to imagine better pathways on the land. That we can be a part of something good here in our watersheds where we live. I'm walking right now amongst green needle grass, some sages, goldenrods that are as old as the prairie. This place presents to us an opportunity for a new way forward and a way to work together as Indigenous and non-Indigenous people on the Regina Plains to see something happen here on this property that would be a kind of coming together in the land, in the watershed, to provide a place where people could practice ceremonies, could teach their young, teach the children what it is to live well in a place and how we are a part of the land as a community. And why the creek and the watershed deserves our respect and the best possible treatment we can offer. This is kind of what we're hoping might happen here. That and right now there is a group of Indigenous people who are approaching the city of Regina to talk about using this space for land-based learning. What a wonderful thing that would be. A place where traditional practices for Indigenous people and cultural awareness could happen right here on the Regina Plains in the city.
Awesome. I was looking at the poster board behind us here, thinking outside the grid, and I think the two speakers that we've just heard from, both Lyndon and my brain just left me. Trevor, thank you. That was a test. Good job. Trevor and Lyndon really, I hope, are starting to spark some thinking outside the grid for all of us.